The Guide to Goals podcast gives you the tools, direction, and resources you need to pursue your passion project. I'm Deborah Eckerling, Project Catalyst, and this is the Guide to Goals podcast. Our guest today is Rick Broida, and we're going to talk about taking risks. Rick has written about consumer technology for over 25 years and is the author of CNET's long-running The Cheapskate blog. Last year, he started Trapped in a Room with a Zombie, an escape room located in downtown Detroit. Welcome, Rick. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, would you like to share a little bit more about yourself and perhaps even more importantly, what is an escape room with a zombie?
Well, you hit the highlights already, so I'll jump right into what an escape room is. It's kind of a growing experience, a growing market of a new kind of game, really, where you are locked in a room with a group of people. Might be friends, might be family, might be coworkers, might be even some people that you don't know. And within that room are going to be usually some sort of themed assortment of clues and puzzles and riddles and things that you have to sort of figure out as you go in order to ultimately escape the room. You have usually a 60-minute countdown timer, and usually you're working against the clock. Now, trapped in a room with a zombie is a little different because we trap you in a room with a zombie.
So you added a little flair to the whole escape room trend.
Absolutely. In the typical escape room, you're working against the clock. And in Trapped, there is the added element of a real live, growling, snarling, chained up zombie who wants nothing more than to eat everyone in the room. And the way it works is that the zombie starts off with a fairly short amount of chain, but every 5 minutes, a buzzer sounds, and the zombie gets an extra foot of chain. So by the end of 60 minutes, the zombie is able to reach the door and everyone in the room. So if you haven't worked out all the puzzles by then, game over.
Wow, that's so freaky cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds pretty awesome. And so you're not the only person who does this, right? These are everywhere.
Right. So I actually licensed the show from the guy who created it. His name is Marty Parker, and he started it in Columbus, Ohio, and then shortly thereafter in Chicago. And that's where I first saw the show. Saw it with my daughter just kind of on a lark, and just came out grinning like an idiot. Like that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And immediately felt like, wow, we got to have this in Detroit. And I reached out to the owner and the creator, and 5 months later we opened in downtown Detroit. It happened very quickly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's is that normally how you go into things? You're like, oh, I love this, I'm going to do it.
This is the second time in my professional life where I thought, oh, I got to do this, and just steamrolled my way into it without really giving it much thought or planning. I'm stupid that way.
But how's it working out for you? And then I'm going to ask you what the other thing was, but tell me
Okay.
first about zombie rooms.
Well, luckily, thankfully, the universe has worked in my favor on this one because Trapped in a Room with a Zombie here in Detroit is going great. We're now about 14 months in. We opened in December 2014, and it's been amazing. It's been amazing. I had no... I'm not an actor. I have no acting experience to speak of. I'm not a producer. I've never really had employees or anyone to manage. I like to sit in my little hovel at my keyboard and type and be antisocial. So to do something like this was to say it was outside my wheelhouse is a gross understatement. I absolutely am an introvert. And in fact, Dave Johnson, who you've had on the show as well, we are very alike in that way, where we can speak before an auditorium of 500 people and not break a sweat. But put us in a small group of just a couple people, and we're just like, no, can't do that. No, bye now. It's a weird kind of introversion, but that's true. So I don't mind the performing aspect of it. The show.
So you are also a zombie, is what you're saying.
I have been a zombie. In fact, I had the opportunity to be a zombie before we opened our show. I got to do it in Chicago, and it was one of the most exhilarating experiences I've ever had. I mean, you're all done up in makeup, you're wearing rags and everything, and you get to roll around on the ground and growl and just be, for an hour, chasing after people and trying to bite them. And I mean, not really bite them, but you get the idea. And it's so much fun. And it's just such a great, I mean, it's a great workout, if nothing else. After an hour, you're just exhausted. It's so cool. It was such a cool thing.
And so you were saying it was completely out of character that you just jumped in, but you really just jumped in.
Right. So after I had seen the show in Chicago and had this just like transformative aha moment where like, oh my, I have to be involved in this somehow. Once the wheels started to get in motion and we licensed the show and found a location and all that stuff, it just kind of started to happen. And as I said, I've never had any experience doing anything like this at all. I literally spend my days in front of my keyboard writing about technology. Occasionally do, a radio spot or something like that on a technology show. But this was far beyond anything I'd done before. And, I was 46, 45 years old at the time and had been doing the same thing for 20 odd years. And you just kind of get to that point where it's just like, well, is this all I'm going to do? And so when this came along, it just seemed like I couldn't pass it up.
Okay, so are we calling this a midlife crisis or just a burst of inspiration?
Call it an undead crisis.
I love it. That's perfect.
Yeah, it definitely was. It was just like, boy, if I'm ever going to do something cool like this, now, this is it. This is the opportunity.
And this is all about passion projects,
Right.
what sort of, so when I heard that you did this, I'm like, oh my God, I have to have him on the podcast because I think it's the things that now you're fortunate because you've been a writer for so many years and you apparently love it. And then you have a side project that's completely different, but you also love. So how'd
Right.
that happen? How'd you get so
Dumb,
lucky?
dumb luck. That's dumb luck. Exactly what it is. I've been lucky enough to be able to have a writing career, writing about mostly consumer technology, that has managed to pay the bills and be fairly steady for a long while. And then this thing came along where it was nothing but unknowns for me. And again, this is a great example of leaping before you look because I just knew I had to be involved with this, even though I had no experience and no really idea what I was doing. And I didn't care. I just didn't care. I was lucky enough to. It wasn't like I had to quit my day job in order to do this, and that's a really nice position to be in, right? Because you don't quite have that same risk looming over you. And once everything started to get in motion, and I realized I could more or less manage both, it all just came together.
So why should people take risks or not take risks or what are your because you said that you're usually very calculated. So do you have any advice for people in terms of I'm like I know you're not going to say, "Oh yeah, quit your day job, open a zombie room. It's the coolest experience ever." But do you have any thoughts for people who are like they know they need to do something else in addition to what they're doing, but they can't quite get there?
Well, it's going to sound like a horrible cliche, but the reality is that you get one shot. You go through life once. And Steve Jobs had this famous quote where he said, basically, "You'll be dead soon." And it's grim, but it's true. And especially as I get into my late 40s and just realizing that what exactly is standing in my way of trying something different? Yes, we all have economic realities. We have to pay the bills and so forth. But there are evenings and there are weekends and there are little slivers of time that you can find to, if you have your passion project, that's something that comes before you that you've always wanted to try, you have to make it happen. You just have to, because otherwise, you get 20, 30 years into whatever job you hate and you realize, God, why didn't I try that? What was I waiting for? Why didn't I take that risk? And I don't want to have that regret. Terrible cliche, but there it is.
Well, it's a cliche that I also very much believe in because I feel that let's say you have a day job that you don't love, then you absolutely need a side project that you're passionate about because that gets you through the thing that makes you money. You mentioned before that this was the second time you leaped.
Yes,
Did the
this was
first time work?
The first time worked as well. This goes back to if you remember the Palm Pilot. Remember those?
I do.
Okay, the Palm Pilot was like the first really big hit PDA. Before cell phones, we had these little handheld digital assistants. And it was about, I don't know, 6 months or a year into the arrival of the Palm Pilot on the market, and it was just snowballing in popularity. And all of a sudden, they were everywhere. And I had one, and I thought it was very, very cool. And I noticed as I was looking on user forums and websites and so forth that everybody was asking the same questions. What case should I buy for this? And can I use this with a keyboard and so forth? And I literally just had that aha moment. Oh God, this thing needs a newsletter. There needs to be a Palm Pilot newsletter. And I remember having the conversation with my wife, like, I wonder if I should start one because, I've always loved publishing and magazines, and I was writing for magazines at the time. And I remember saying to her, well, how hard could it be? I'll just do it on nights and weekends and it'll just be a little project or whatever. And so Tap was born. I started this newsletter called Tap because you were tapping on the screen, and so thought I was clever. And I started this little newsletter, and like I had no idea what I was doing. I had no experience with publishing or anything, but I just like I have to do this. This is too cool not for this not to happen. And long story short, it evolved from a two-color, I think, bi-monthly newsletter into a full-fledged magazine that ended up on newsstands and had a decent life to it. Ran for about 5 years, I think. Yeah, I think it launched in 97, maybe 96.
This was before blogs.
Oh,
This
yes.
was way, way before blogs.
This was in the dark ages.
Hmm. So you were ahead of your time then. So you don't have to worry about that as a side project anymore. 'Cause
No.
they're gone. So how do you balance your life? Because you've got basically, I don't want to say two day jobs, but basically two you jobs that are completely different.
It has been challenging for certain. And because I have been battling this learning curve along the way, instead of like knowing what I was doing or partnering with somebody who knew what they were doing, just learning it as I went, the challenge for the first 14 months leads us up to now, has just been like making every mistake and recovering from those mistakes and learning and moving forward. And again, I'm just lucky in that because I freelance for a living, my schedule is flexible. And if I need to have a day where I spend half the day downtown, or I need to give up a Saturday or whatever for whatever, I can do that. And so I'm just lucky to have that flexibility. I realize not everyone does, definitely. But if you're willing to give up sleep and being with your friends and family, you can have it all.
I was just going to ask you about work-life balance, but is it moot, or do you have a way that you actually do see your friends and family?
Um, no, I I just do a really poor job of getting things done on time and taking care of things that need to be done so that I can goof off when I need to goof off. No, I don't have any secret recipe to it. It's somehow it works. Just again, lucky in that both of these jobs don't require my a full time 100% attention. I can give 50% to each. It just works.
So you basically created the life you want, and just this most recent part was an accident that worked out really, really well.
Yes, yeah, lucky, dumb lucky accident.
Do you have, and you might have answered this already, is there something that you know now that you wish you knew when you started the escape room thing?
Um, that's a great question. The thing it's not yeah the thing that I've learned in the last year and 2 years is that it's so important not to dwell on stuff that's happened in the past, mistakes that you've made. I have made every possible conceivable mistake with running this business. Thankfully, none of them have been devastating. But old Rick, the older Rick, the previous Rick, I'm old Rick, would have just beat himself senseless, going over these mistakes over and over again and how stupid he was and so forth. And older, wiser Rick realizes that mistakes are going to happen, and there is absolutely no point wasting your energy on reliving those mistakes. You just learn from it, move on, keep going. I sound like every bad self-help book that was ever written, but there you go.
Or alternatively, you sound like every good self-help book ever written. That's what you should do next, right? Like self-help from zombies or something.
They're
You
the zombie's guide to a happy life.
and
Let's
then you
write it.
then you could sell it at your zombie rooms.
Ah, I know. We're missing out on a great marketing opportunity.
Yeah, you totally need to do that.
Yeah, I in my spare time, I will just crank out a book. You know what? I actually did do that a couple years ago. If you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead into shameless plug mode. I write this blog for CNET called the Cheapskate, which is
Hmm.
just basically a collection of a technology deal of the day, which I kind of scrounge up from various sources. And but it also includes buying advice. And so a few years back, I kind of put some of the best tips together into a book that I self-published on Amazon, and it's called the Cheapskate Rules, 21 money saving tech secrets or something like that. It's a big, long, clunky title. And it was, again, just something that I had, I took little bits of extra time when I could. It took me 3 months, maybe longer, to actually get the whole thing done. But it's short, and I just threw it up on Amazon to see what would happen. And it just, generated a nice little bit of extra income, and was kind of like, oh, yeah, this is a no-brainer. Things to do in your spare time, write a book.
See, you're outing yourself as someone who's got a bunch of mini passion projects. I bet if we talked for longer, we won't. But if we did, you'd be like, "Oh,
Wait, I've
I did
got
that
more. Wait,
too."
don't hang up.
But it's good. It's the pockets of time.
Hmm?
That's the secret. So this is the part where I transition into giving our listeners or watchers, depending on if they're watching on YouTube or listening on iTunes or whatever, a personal and a professional goal. And there are just so many from this conversation. But I think for the personal goal should be to go to a zombie room. But I think that's a little bit too specific. So why don't we just say do something fun that might be a little out of your comfort zone?
I would definitely agree with that, for sure.
Okay. And for professional goal is that thing that keeps nagging at you that you think you want to do. You should take some time and plot out a plan. Not plot out too much because this episode is about taking risks. But how do we say take a risk but plan to take a risk?
um, let's make a plan to be spontaneous this weekend, you know? It's
That
exactly
should
what
have
you're
been
going
the
for.
personal goal.
Right. Um, yeah, it's I just keep going back to life is so short, and the last thing you want to do is kind of get to the point where you're ready to retire and you realize, oh, I really should have done this. And the old saw, nobody ever sits on their deathbed and says, oh, I wish I'd worked more. Do the thing that's going to make you happy, and you may not know what that is unless you take a risk, right?
So the personal goal is to do something out of your comfort zone, plan some spontaneity. And then the professional goal is to give some give some headspace to that thing that you really want to do and see if you can make it happen.
I love that. Yeah, definitely the headspace idea. Sit and meditate on your idea for 20 minutes and just see how you feel at the end of it. Are you like devastated and scared, or are you excited and raring to go? Just see how it feels.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Rick Broida, for joining us today. Again, Rick is the Cheapskate blog guy and Cheapskate book guy, as well as the Trapped in a Room with the Zombie guy. And if you go to guidedgoals.com, I'll have links to all the wonderful things, these resources, and anything you want to add, Rick?
One thing that also really helps a lot is having a supportive spouse. And that's one other area where I have been insanely lucky, because both of these projects, starting Tap Magazine and starting Trapped in a Room with a Zombie, at no point did my wife ever say, I don't like the sound of that, or, we can't afford to do that, or you're too busy already. Just the opposite. I mean, she was so incredibly supportive and encouraging, and that is a huge part of the equation. If you don't have somebody who is in your corner to cheer you on, it's that much harder to make your passion project work. So I am I am forever indebted to my wife. And I hope anyone who's aiming to do something likewise has that kind of support. It means a lot.
That's just so nice and well said. Okay, thank you again for joining us, Rick. And everyone else, go out there, go for it.